Okay.
All right.
So we have an intimate crowd today.
Okay. So l'chaim, l'chaim. So there's a very famous dad joke, which every dad has to know, that when you're driving out in the fields, you know, out in the bush, and you go past a farm, and you see that there's a scarecrow standing there. Now, every dad has to say to their children whilst they're driving past, I think that scarecrow deserves a medal. And of course, the kids are going to ask, why? Well, it's very simple, because it's outstanding in his field. Now, when we think of a scarecrow in its nature, as it is called, it's meant to scare off the birds, it's meant to scare off the animals. I don't know what it's really meant to do, because most time you've got a bird usually sitting on top of the scarecrow. Yeah. All right, so it's all dressed up, all right, you know, with a hat and shirts and pants and etc. etc. It's got, you know, everything with it. The only thing is that it's filled with hay. Correct? Just doesn't have a person inside. Okay, but the purpose of it is to be able to scare from its externalities. It's meant to scare those things which they don't want standing there. They don't want being there. So I'd like to share with you an interesting idea, and we're going to come back to the scarecrow a little bit later on. I saw a very, very interesting midrash, all right, which explains, I guess, a very interesting question. Okay, so if we're able to set the scene. In last week's parsha, Yaakov cunningly steals from Esav the blessing. Yeah. Okay, he gets dressed up and he goes into his father and he comes down.
But he had an accomplice.
His mother, of course. Now, one thing.
Sorry? More than a yeah, I know. She's engineered. Yeah.
Okay. She was the one which was behind it. Now, one thing which I guess we sort of really need to accept in this whole story is that with all of the bad that Esav has done, we need to sort of recognize two parts. First of all, we need to recognize that Esav really, really wanted to be a good boy. All right, he did. He really wanted to be able to, you know, to be positive and to give his father honor. But for whatever reason, Esav never hit the mark. All right, he never hit the mark. We go, for example, you know, why did he sell?
What makes you say that he wanted to intrinsically be good? How do we know that?
Well, I'll show you a few examples. First of all, when it comes in it's the story of Jacob selling him the pot of lentils. All right, the soup. Okay, so Esav comes home from a long day at work. All right, now his work wasn't, you know, an honest business, but nonetheless he'd make a living. All right, he comes home. Now everyone knows, all right, especially amongst men, if you haven't eaten during the day, okay, you come home, your sugar levels aren't really where they're meant to be. Okay, now every wife and mother knows that when a boy comes in the home after being away, you've got to like aim a schnitzel at their mouth, and hopefully that it will get in and their sugar levels will change before they start talking and annoying everyone. You know, it's, you know, we can get a bit grumpy, correct? Esav, never. The guy comes home, he's hungry. All right. His brother says to him, well, you know, you want some of it? He says, yeah, of course I want something. You know, I'd kill for it. So he says, all right, so sell your thing. Now, of course, he's going to sell anything at that time. He wants to eat food. Now, you can imagine his disappointment in himself afterwards, that he came and he sold it. Okay, because on what? What did he sell it for? Something which was nonsense. The time of the blessings come. His father says to him, he says, Esav, I want you to go out and I want you to hunt for me and come and cook me a meal. Esav didn't say, Tati, I've got a few business deals, I've got a few this, I've got a few that, I'll get to it, don't worry. What's the first thing he did? He went out and faithfully he went to find the best for his father. Okay, what could he do that his mother had given up hope on him? Okay, and Nebuch, beat him to it, and he comes, and you can see his true. He wanted to finally. He's got an opportunity. His father's asked something from him. He's finally got an opportunity to be able to come and do something for his father. All right, and his brother beats him to it. Okay. Rivka comes and looks at Yaakov and says, well, we've got to marry him off. All right, I don't want him to marry one of the girls from here. He's got to go to Haran. Esav, of course, hears this. He's already married 2 Canaanite wives, and he's thinking to us, I've disappointed my parents again. So he says, well, how can I make them happy? So he goes and he marries one of Ishmael's daughters. Now you can imagine that went down even worse, all right, with his parents. In so many opportunities, he wanted to be able to impress and to be loved by his family. Now, we see, and this is the interesting thing about Yitzchak. Yitzchak never gave up on him. All right, Yitzchak wanted to give him the blessing. Yitzchak loved his son, okay, and he cherished him, and he wanted to be able, that something good should come of him. And there's lots of midrashim which come and reflect this idea, okay, which come afterwards, okay. And so he was misguided, and he had all of these things, but we see that Yitzchak still loved him, and the proof is that he wanted to give him the blessing. All right, he wanted that he should be around. Now, when we understand this, we find ourselves in this week's parsha. Yaakov, okay, has to run away. He flees. We have the story with the ladder. He ends up in Haran. He ends up getting married, okay, and he ends up getting married. He's got 4 wives, and he starts to have children. Now, the interesting thing happens. From Leah, he has many children. Zilpah, Bilhah, he has many children. Rachel's the only one, his cherished wife. She's the only one that can't produce for him a child. She finally gives birth to Yosef. Straight away after he receives Yosef, he comes and he says to Lavan, I think it's time that I should go home now. Why suddenly now does he decide that it's time for him to go home? You can imagine that he wanted more than anything throughout the entire time that he should be able to go back to see his parents. Now, obviously, he can't go back to see his parents because he knows that Esav is going to kill him. Why suddenly now he has Yosef? He's like, oh yeah, now I can come and I can approach my brother. Now I can go and I can deal with this conflict which I have with my brother. What on earth is Yosef coming and adding to it? Suddenly now Rachel has a child. He says, yeah, now I can go back and I can deal with Esav. Now I've got to go and see my parents. He wanted to see his parents all this time. Where does Yosef come into it? So there's the most beautiful midrash which comes and explains this whole ordeal. When we look in Jewish history, our greatest antagonist is the children of Esav. Okay? Amalek, the children of Esav. Okay?
But don't we generally, just an interest, to refer to everyone as Amalek? Like everyone who hates the Jews is classified as Amalek.
Well, we do, but there are certain lineages which we know for sure is so Esav, Amalek. Haman comes from Amalek, Esav. Rome, Esav. Okay? So when we start to recognize certain parts, we realize that Esav comes and causes, so when we come to Germany, these are the descendants of Esav. So of course the Midrash comes and asks and says, Esav, why are you so mean to your brother? All right, he stole from you the blessing, he did this, but for so many years, you've got this anger, you've got this problem, you've got this issue. All right, why? Just get over it, move on, forgive, go live your life, do what it is that you need to do. So Asaph comes to the children of Israel, says, you are coming and telling me about how to treat a sibling. Let me just remind you, you had a 17-year-old brother, Yosef. Your father loved him very much, same way my father loved me. He was coming down he was sent by your father to go and say hello, to speak to you guys. And what did you guys do to him? You beat him. You threw him into a pit. You sold him as a slave. You're coming and telling us. You're coming and telling me how I need to treat a brother. So the Midrash says, the only one that has an answer for Esav is Yosef. All right? The only one that Esav doesn't have any response to is Yosef. Why? Because Yosef, even though he was beaten by his brothers, even though he was sold, even though he was put in a pit, even though he experienced all of those difficulties from the age of 17 till the age of 30, with all of that, he becomes the viceroy of Egypt. And his brothers come to him. And he has now the opportunity to come and say, all right, guys, all right, fair is fair. All right, you had your time in the sun. I've got now my time in the sun. You were bigger than me. Now I'm bigger than you. All right, I now have the ability to get my revenge. I now have the ability. What's the story? They come to him, they realize it's Yosef, and they say, Yosef, please forgive us, etc., etc. And Yosef comes and he says, you think that you sent me here to do bad? All right, you thought that, you got me. Hashem sent me here so that I should be able to be here to provide for you and your families. All right. Yosef resembles and expresses this idea which Esav needs to hear. That Esav feels the injustice. Along comes Yosef and he says, I also had siblings that cheated me and beat me and did all of these bad things to me. All right, but I moved on, I forgave. Where does Yosef get this from? Okay, where does Yosef get this from? Yaakov comes to Haran. There, he sees the most beautiful girl, Rachel. Okay, she's young, she's flamboyant, she's happy, she's joyous, she's outgoing. All right. Full of life. He sees her and he's like, yeah, that's the woman that I want to marry. That's the lady that, I'm going to have so much fun. We're going to go to Europe together and we're going to hang out and, we're going to have this fun and that, everything. It's great.
That's his fourth wife.
1 second. This is still before he's married. All right. He sees her. All right. Rachel, we're going to get married. He goes to Lavan and he says, Lavan, you've got this most wonderful daughter. Amazing. All right. Can we sort something out? He says, no worries, work with me for 7 years. He says, no, 7 years, not a problem. I'll work for you for 7 years. Now, he comes, he gets married. The chuppah's getting ready. Yaakov knows that Lavan is a cheat. So he says to Rachel, he says, listen, I know that your father is going to try to switch things around. Okay? You've got an older sister, and your older sister needs to get married. Now, he didn't want to marry Leah. Okay? Why? Because Leah was the complete opposite of Rachel. She was depressed. She was introvert, at home. She didn't want to go out. She didn't want this, The
spinster sister.
Well, possibly, all right? Possibly, but the complete opposite. It says, I know that this is what's going to happen. I'm going to give you 3 signs. What makes a good Jewish woman? All right? So, Chana, Chala, Nida, and Hadlakat Ner. Okay? The mitzvah of taking Chala that we do on Shabbos. All right? The laws of family purity and the lighting of Shabbos candles. It says, under the chuppah, that's what I'm going to ask you. Because if your father's going to trick me and he's going to put this, I want to make sure that I know exactly what I'm coming and doing. Now, of course, what ends up happening? He tricks him. Okay. Now, how didn't Yaakov find out? He wakes up the next morning, all right, and who does he see? He doesn't see Rachel. He sees Leah, all right? And this is the story of everyone that gets married. You know, just ask your wife.
At the wedding and passed out.
Just ask your wife. You know, she says, you know, before we got married, you know, you were so outgoing and so happy and so this. Now you want to do is sit at home, read the newspaper, and watch the soccer. All right, that's the way that it is. You know, we want to marry the Rachel. We want to marry, you know, that happy, joyous, you know, flamboyant person, and then we end up, you know, discovering 1 second, you know, who our spouse is. Okay. Now, how didn't he find out? He gave us signs. All right, he gave us signs. But this is where we come and we see Rachel, who she was. She realized what's going to happen. The entire town's brought to this event. Now she recognizes her sister doesn't do well, all right, in general. Now, could you imagine her embarrassment, her shame? Under the chuppah, he's going to say this and she's not going to know what to respond. And then he's going to, you know, bust up the whole wedding and everyone says, my sister, she'll die. She'll die from embarrassment. I can't do that to my sister. So she says to her, she says, just letting you know, I'll give you this information. Now, there's an interesting interaction which takes place a little bit later. Reuven, the eldest son of Leah, was out in the field and he brought back some flowers. All right, the plant, the dudai plant. All right, many translations of what it is, doesn't really matter, but it's a plant which, if you eat from its fruit, it's meant to help with fertility. Rachel, she's the only one that doesn't have a child. Everyone else has a child with her husband. All right, she sees Reuven with them. She comes over to Reuven. She says, Reuven, you know, do you mind if you can give me those things so that I should be able to eat them, so that I should be able to be blessed also with a child? Along comes Leah, and she comes and she says, you took my husband, and now you're coming to take the plants of my child? Now, anyone in their right mind, all right, especially Rachel, will stop for a moment, and she'll come and say, your husband? Let me just remind you something. Before you got married, all right, I was the one which was meant to be sitting there, okay? Before you got married, I was the one, I let you marry my husband. Now, this is where we see something very interesting, is that Rachel, when she told her sister the signs, she didn't come and say to her, just to let you know that Yaakov is worried about marrying you. She just gave her the information, just letting you know that there are 3 signs that every good Jewish woman has there, and these are the signs. So she didn't even embarrass her sister in that regard. She could have said, yeah, you remember when I told you about those 3 signs, darling? All right, just to let you know that if not, Yaakov never wanted to marry you. He didn't like you. He doesn't want you. Okay? She doesn't say any of that. She stays shtum. The only thing she says, you know what? I so much want a child. All right? Let Yaakov be with you tonight. All right? But at least I should be able to have the fertility from these particular things. Okay? Now, to be able to live in such a manner that you are so forgiving, to be able to live in such a manner in which a person comes and says, you can't take from me something which wasn't destined to happen to me. All right, Rachel, she realized if she's meant to be the only one to marry Yaakov, then that's what will happen. The fact that Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah, they all married him and etc., well, that's obviously what was destined. That's obviously what God had planned. But you can't take from me something that has already been given to me. The fact that you have something that I don't have, and it just means something very simple, that I wasn't blessed with it. I've got blessed with other things, so therefore I don't have to be envious of you. I don't have to be jealous of you. I don't need to get revenge from you. I don't need to do anything in spite of you. Now, it's an unbelievable manner to live with. But of course, the question is that something which is feasible? Can we actually live in such a world? All right. You know, in the business world, you chase things up. All right. You run after things. You know, he's told my client, I'm going to steal his client. You know, that's the way that we do business. That's the way that, you know, we've got to be able to, it's a cutthroat society. Along comes Rachel and she says, no, what are you talking about? Do business the way that you need to do business. Whatever you're meant to get, you're meant to get. A competitor's done better and et cetera, who cares? If I'm not meant to have that particular client, then I'll never have had it. So there's no point in me getting upset or anxious about it. I just need to do what I need to do. Now, it's a huge way of living, but the question is, of course, can humans actually do that? And this is exactly the question the Zohar explains. Why Rachel wasn't blessed with a child for many years, because that was the exact question. Yaakov was coming and looking at this situation and thinking to himself, Gewalt, how is it possible that she'll ever have a child? How is it possible that in such a manner of living that there will be continuation of that? She's a special soul. She's a tzaddikus, but there's no way that there could be a child. Until finally, Yosef comes into the story. All right? Yosef comes into the story and he's born. By him being born, this was recognition that that manner of thought, that manner of idealism, is actually something which is possible for a person to live with. That is actually possible for someone to be able to internalize and to make part of their lives. When Yaakov came and saw, 1 second, she's got a child. Suddenly now I have the strength that I'll be able to go back to my brother. Suddenly now I'll be able to go and confront him. Because he's jealous of me. He feels the injustice of me, and et cetera, et cetera. But with Yosef in the world, I'll be able to teach him this very important lesson. And what is that? Is that you can't get something in this world that you don't deserve. You can't get something in this world that wasn't destined to be yours. And if that is the case, therefore there is no reason that I should ever be jealous or ever be vengeful towards someone else, but rather recognize that what I have, I'm blessed with. Now, this is, we see an interesting interaction between Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov comes and he wants to give a gift to his brother Esav. So he wants to give him the gift, and Esav comes and he says to him, he says, thank you very much. All right. Yeshli Rav. He says, I've got much. Now, when Esav wants to give Yaakov a gift, what does Yaakov say? Thank you very much. Yeshli Akol. He says, I've got everything. What's the difference between when someone comes and tells you, I've got plenty, or someone comes and says, no, I've got everything that I need? What's the difference? Well, I've got plenty, but I could do with some more.
Attitude.
So here, Esav may have plenty, but you know what? I certainly can do with more. But if I've got everything, I don't need any more. And if I get any more, you know, it's a blessing. But that approach is a very, very important approach to be able to understand Esav. Because Esav lived his life being upset that the fact of what Yaakov did to him. In what manner? He feels the injustice of being gotten the better of. Now this, when we go back to the scarecrow, all right, the scarecrow only looks scary. But inside the scarecrow is actually made out of straw. Now this is the interesting thing that the Midrash comes and finishes off with. And it comes and it says that the children of Yosef will take fire and burn down the straw of Esav, meaning to destroy Esav, because Esav is made up out of straw. When Esav comes home, all right, and he sees the lentil soup, what was the attribute which caused that he wanted to have the soup? So he says, I want that red dish. He didn't say I want that tasty dish. He didn't say I want that nutritional dish. He says I want that red dish. Now, by coming and calling it the red dish, what was it that he saw? just the way that it looked. It looked tasty. Okay? When the snake came to Chava and said about the tree, what did he say? He says, look, it looks good. Okay? This idea of looking in externalities is the life of Esav. How will it be presented to others? I've got a brother that got the better of me. People will think that I'm weak. Now, when Esav comes to fight with Yaakov, it says that he was with 400 men. Why 400 men? Why not 300 men? Why not 1,000 men? What's the idea of 400? So the Kabbalah explains that 400 is Ein Ra, a bad eye. Esav lived his life with a bad eye. What does that mean? If someone else has something and I don't have it, that reflects badly on me because I need to have everything. I may not need it. It may not serve any purpose for me, but how will it look to other people? Wherever Esav went, he always went with 400 men. What does the Zohar come and tell us about this? It says, what do you mean? You need to go with 400 men. Every place that you go, you need to be able to look scary. Every place you go, you need to be able to look impressive. Every place you go, you need to be able to have that entourage so that people will be able to see you. In our society today, many people live, you just go on Instagram and Facebook, the other things, and you'll see the public portrayal of certain people's lives. How many scammers were able to scam people simply because they portrayed themselves as unbelievably wealthy people on, Instagram and Facebook. And so whenever they meet, you just see there's people did with the business deals, not even looking into and seeing 1 second. Am I dealing here with a scarecrow or am I dealing here with a real person? But it comes down to Ein Ra, meaning having that bad eye, having that perspective of looking at someone else and thinking, how on earth did you get that? You don't deserve it. You didn't work as hard as me for that. How did you ever receive that? Now, of course, someone that lives such a life, they're never content, they're never happy. The flip side of that is Rachel. Why? Because Rachel was always able to look at another person. She was happy for her sister. She was happy for the maidservants. She was happy for everyone else to be able to have what they have because she had that understanding. If I'm meant to receive something, I'll receive it. God will make sure that it will happen. Yosef, exactly the same. Yosef went out, had all of the most terrible things transpire in his life. But he looked good at his brothers, never seeked to be able to get revenge, never seek to be able to get his back. Because you know what? He knew that whatever he was meant to deserve, he was going to receive. The Jewish people are leaving Egypt. The first people to come and fight with the Jewish people, Amalek, descendants of Esav. Moshe doesn't say, all right, I'm going out to battle. Who does he call? He says, Joshua, take some men and go and fight with Amalek. Why Joshua? Because he's a descendant from Ephraim. He's a great grandson of Yosef. The story of Purim with Haman, Esther and Mordechai. Which tribe do they belong to? Binyamin. All right, Binyamin is the brother of Yosef, the son of Rachel. Okay. We see that the manner in which we need to confront Esav is with a good eye. The manner in which we need to recognize this hatred which we have towards us is to be able to be with a good eye. Because what is it? It's a jealousy. No one can take away, this is the most interesting thing about the Jewish people. No one can take away the achievements of the Jewish people. When they talk about white privilege and they talk about all of these things, okay? You get the odd person that tries to throw in the Jew, okay? But anyone with a little bit of brain in their heads will realize we worked for what we got. All right. It came with toil. When you take two of the wealthiest Jews here in Australia and you think to yourselves 1 second, what type of privilege did they have? They came as refugees. They came with nothing. What did they achieve? They achieved what they deserved to achieve. They didn't get anything on a silver platter. They didn't inherit, all right, old money. They worked for what they got. They got what they deserved. Now, of course, that's the envy of so many other people. It goes on to 8, be envious. It's just going to eat you up. You're just going to be another Esav. You're just going to be another scarecrow. You're just going to live a life of not being content. But this is the recognition which we have from Rachel and Leah, from Rachel, that Rachel has that perspective. When we give our children a blessing on a Friday night, so for the girls, what do we say? Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. But when it comes to the boys, who do we say?
Yeah.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, possibly. Why Ephraim and Manasseh? Because when Yaakov comes to give a blessing to Ephraim and Manasseh, so Manasseh being the older one should have gotten the right hand on his head and the left, but he did the opposite. Yosef comes and he says to his father, and he says, Tati, I'm sorry, but you've got this mixed up. He's the older one and he's the younger one. Your right hand should be on him. Now, you need to realize Ephraim and Manasseh are sitting there. What does Yaakov come and say? Yaakov comes and says, my son, I completely understand that, but Ephraim will be bigger than Manasseh. Ephraim will reach greater achievements. Now, in our modern PC environment, what are you talking about? A Gavalt. You've just destroyed that child. Manasseh stands there, and Manasseh's like, cool, yeah, he'll probably be bigger than me, but he can't take from me what I'm going to be. All right, I'm going to be who I'm going to be. He's going to be who he's going to be. He wants to give him a bigger blessing, goes on to hate. Let him have that blessing. I don't need to hold anything against him because I could never take what he's meant to be. It's this that we come and we give a blessing to our children. We can't do that with Isaac. We can't do that with Jacob. All right? There was sibling rivalry.
That's why you do Ephraim.
That's why we do Ephraim and Manasseh. I want children. I want you to be like Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, there's a very interesting part, and I gave a drush about this last year. In our environment, all right, it's a very wrong thing to do, all right, to what Yaakov did. But I do honestly believe that there's a very important lesson that needs to be learned from this particular idea. And that is that we need our children to recognize that the world is unjust. We need to recognize that it is unfair. Okay? We're not going to receive the same experiences as someone else. It's not going to happen. That would only cause you anguish if the end line of the race, we all had the same end line. But that's not the case. We don't have the same end line. We all have our own race. We all have our own end line. And so therefore, if I'm like Esav and I'm looking at how things are perceived, so yes, all right, so he's ahead of me and he's got that, and that's so unjust and that's so unfair. But this is the message which we receive from Rachel. There's no such thing as being unjust. Externally, yes, it might look that way. But a person needs to recognize that you can't have something stolen from you that wasn't meant to be stolen from you. Esav, you weren't meant to be. That's it. That wasn't your mission in this world. Now, Esav could come and say, well, 1 second, Gavalt, I've had great empires. The Roman Empire, I think that would be something we're quite proud, Here, I've achieved something. And that is a beautiful thing. All right, the Roman Empire was a great addition to the... It was, all right, it was. But this is the message which we need to have as the Jewish people, is to be able to come and recognize that we have a mission, we have a purpose. And therefore, whatever's going to transpire in our lives, we need to be content and we need to be happy with it. We need to recognize, someone else. It's a lot easier for us to be joyous in someone else's problems than it is to be happy in their successes. To be able to see someone else succeed and to be able to smile and say, Gewalt. I'm so happy for you. That's wonderful. And you know what? I wish you make 10 times more. It's harder for us because we look at it and we say, 1 second, well, what does that reflect upon me? How do I perceive that? I once asked this question, what's more difficult for you? To see that good people suffer or that bad people prosper? Which one is more difficult?
Well, that's the whole Holocaust. That's one of the more difficult Holocaust questions, actually.
But which one of these things is more bothersome to you? That good people suffer or that bad people prosper?
That good people suffer.
Well, I hope so. But in many instances, if we're honest with ourselves, we'll actually realize that sometimes there's an element of jealousy when I see someone else prosper and I think they don't deserve it. All right. Rachel comes and teaches us that's not any perspective that we should have on another person. Another person succeeds. Gesundheit. All right. Enjoy it. There's an interesting thing which King David says in Psalms. When we read the verse in its simple translation, King David comes and says, God, I'll know that you cherish me by not letting me be harmed by my enemies. Okay? Now that's a very simple way of coming and recognizing, well, if I know that Hashem cherishes me, that's a good. The Baal Shem Tov comes and explains it differently. He comes and he says, Hashem, how will I know that you cherish me? That my enemies aren't going to be harmed because of me. All right? Meaning, if you want to bring on them punishment, Gesundheit, go for it. But don't let that be any connection to me. I'm not interested in revenge. I've suffered enough in my life. I don't need anyone else to suffer because of me. I don't need that to happen. On the Seder night, the first thing which we do as part of the actual Seder itself, we take the middle matzah and we break it. Hey, Lachmanya, this is our bread of affliction. And it's here that we say, anyone that's need, come and eat with me. Anyone that's struggling, I'll come and I'll help you out. This is the way that we come and we begin the Seder. There's a huge message here. Most people that experience pain, their first response is revenge. I want the other person to suffer. The Jewish people come and we say, this is our bread of affliction. This is the moment that we recognize our oppression. This is the moment that we recognize our pain. This is the moment to realize the injustice of the world. We've been sent here, we've been sent there. This has happened to us, that has happened. This is the moment that we're coming remembering it. What's our response? If you're in pain, come here, let me help you. If I've suffered enough, I don't need anyone else to suffer on my behalf. It's not going to help me to know that you're going to suffer. What's going to help me is recognizing that, you know what? We're going to be able to ease the pain for everyone else. Rachel wasn't able to be blessed with a child for many years. She wouldn't have received any happiness or joy from the fact that her sister was also cursed. It's not going to help her in any way. It's not going to fix anything up in her life. But this is the message which we come from this week's parsha. Our ability to come and recognize and be happy with our lot. When we're happy with our lot, when we're happy with what we've got, it's here that we're able to overcome Esav. It's here that we're able to come all of the difficult things which we have in our lives. People look at us with envy. People look at us as, you know what, God should bless you with even more than I've got. Next time you see someone that's, sometimes someone wants to give you a blessing, you can tell their jealousy. All right, they come to you and they say, what blessing could I give to someone that has everything? What blessing could I give to someone that, they've got this and they've got that and everything? He's like, 1 second, I say, you blessing me, you're cursing me. All right?
That's a different part.
It's here that we need to come and recognize, you know what? If you feel that someone has envy, you give them a blessing. If you feel that someone has hatred towards you, wish them well. Okay? Now, this of God, of course, is not the idea that, someone comes to beat you, so you give them your chin. No. We have batons and we have different things. And we take care of ourselves. So that's why we've got F-16s and all of these other things. But you know what? The greatest blessing that you can have is knowing that your enemy is too busy with his business and everything else that he's not even thinking of you. That's the greatest blessing that you can have. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Well,